Hello, thanks for joining us. My name is David Malone.
And my name's Ian Stroud. Welcome to Hyperland.
I thought I'd like to talk about education and the rather horrid muddle that I think it's in.
How long has our current educational system been going?
Well, that's a bit of a difficult question. I mean, in some ways, I think that the things which have gone awry with our system, in a sort of ironic way, have grown out of a lot of the improvements that the Blair dynasty tried to bring in. Some of which you can see why they tried to do it. But I think, like a lot of things, they were well-intentioned and they probably did do some good things. But then they've taken on a very negative life of their own.
Do you think that the political parties have been using education a little bit more like we accuse them of using the NHS as a football?
No, it's not like the NHS, because I think most people think of the NHS as a wonderful thing, to one degree or another.
Yeah, but education is a wonderful thing as well.
Well, it's said that a lot of people, you hear them, they're open to people going, teachers, they're lazy, they get so much time off and it's a bit of an easy job, and if you can't teach. And so I think there is more of a tendency to think teachers have it easy, and if there's something wrong, it's probably the teacher's fault. That was certainly the Blair view, wasn't it?
Yeah, but let me clarify my comment. Education is a good thing, and that is teaching knowledge is great. I'm not saying that our educational system is good.
Yeah. When you say how long has the system been going on, a big notable change was when the Gang of Four started, when they broke away from Labour.
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, I was only a kid at the time, but talked to my parents, a lot of it was over what do we do with the grammar schools and the whole secondary modern idea.
Yeah.
And at least from my view, and I'm not an expert on it, it did seem to me that there was a well-intentioned idea, really a good idea, a defensible idea, that rather than arbitrarily setting kids an exam at 11 and then those that passed went to a better school and those that didn't. Because even as an 11-year-old, I knew there was something wrong with that system, because a good friend of mine at junior school, 11, called Stephen Main, even I knew as a kid there was something really wrong, that somehow I was sent to a grammar school and he went to a secondary modern. Even at 11, I thought, that's mad. Stephen's really bright, interesting, clever kid.
It was the 11 plus, and even I passed it and ended up in a grammar school. It's hard to talk about something. I'm trying to ignore the personal. I really disliked school. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I felt uncomfortable in there. There's issues that I think about in terms of spectral disorders and autism and dyslexia and things like that.
Yeah.
I interestingly listened to a podcast a while ago. I think it was on trigonometry. And there was a man on it called Michael Malice. It's kind of when my ears sort of first pricked up a little bit. He was describing the educational system in the US. His criticism was that everyone learns at the same rate. You don't ask questions. You all think the same. You don't question the narrative. But he elaborated a bit more and sort of said it's there to break spirits.
And the thing is, it doesn't have to be. I do think we need to look at the educational system pronto. As far as, is it worse here than in America? Well, I haven't lived in America for a long time now, but I did teach there for a year.
You taught there.
I taught for a year under, and that was in the 80s. So for most people, that's, ancient history. My kids learnt about the 80s in their history class.
Wow.
Nothing. I suddenly felt really old. I think, wait a minute, I'm historic?
Can I tell you what I learnt about in my history class?
What?
It was the Bogman. Do you mean?
I'll tell you what I wanted to sort of, what prompted me is, funnily enough, it's the whole COVID business, because my lads were going through university at that point.
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly they said, look, the young are not really taking this seriously because it doesn't affect them, and they're all traveling around and having parties. How true that was, I don't know.
Yeah.
And they need to remember that even if it's not going to hurt them, it's going to hurt their parents or certainly their grandparents. And that message sort of stuck, and that the lads were either locked down at university, or had to come home. And luckily, it was clear that the writing was on the wall. So I just said to them, "Come home now."
Yeah.
And this was before the universities had shut down. I said, "I know. Don't wait for them to tell you that you're locked in your room. Come home now." And they did.
Yeah.
But it was clear then how damaging it was to my lads missing out on university, and even worse for kids who are facing their A levels or their GCSEs. I mean, there's a whole cohort of kids from 15 through to 24, who one way or the other really got hammered because they just didn't get an education. My brother's daughter was still in high school, so I could see both sides. And the message was right in the sense that, yes, it wasn't that generation wasn't in danger, but it was much more dangerous for their grandparents. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, and by and large, the kids did do what was asked of them. They missed out on face-to-face teaching. They missed out going to school. They missed out all of the camaraderie of being at school, all the decent, the bits of school that help sustain you as a person.
Yeah.
All of that got absolutely knocked on the head, not for just a year,
it was
for several years.
Yeah.
And there's a whole cohort of kids now who they haven't been caught up. There's just no way that they got as much education, not even a fraction of what they ought to have. And in a way, that generation took it on the chin.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's appalled me that the generation that said, you need to do this for us, surely that generation, essentially my generation and older, should now, or should have a year ago, said, right, these kids really paid the price. We now need to turn around and say to them, you did something extraordinary for us. Thank you. We are now going to do something extraordinary for you. But have they?
Yeah.
No, they haven't. They've just said, and when I say they, I mean my generation and above, they basically said, yeah, thanks. Okay, where's my train pass and where's my pension? And just carried on underfunding the schools, which as a voting generation, they've done for their entire lives.
Yeah.
I'm just utterly, utterly appalled that it's not even occurred to them that they owe that younger generation something. And then when you then get the news that, and we've spent 40 years, every government of whichever color rosette has been saying, well, we'll just, we'll knock up some schools with something that's cheap because, it's temporary and we're in a rush and we've got other priorities. And of course, the great British temporary means forever.
Yeah.
If a British politician says, can you hold my beer? Say no, because you'll be there 10 years later still holding his beer for him.
Yeah, but I think there was an interesting report that came out in the last couple of days. John Curtis was over it.
Mm.
And it was looking at sort of the sort of social factors of putting up tax to pay for things.
Yeah.
It did look at sort of our age, sort of saying, yes, that's a good thing. But like you sort of said, I think the younger age group, certainly the age group that you're talking about, they were against it. Or less for it, if that makes sense.
Well, they were less willing to put up taxes to pay for things.
Probably because they have all the problems of buying a home and jobs. And I mean, when we start out in life, we're all skint. I mean, I was.
Sure. Same here, yeah. But on the other hand, so you get out of school or you get out of university and you're skint, you think, I'm just getting started in life.
Yeah.
That's what a graduated tax system is for.
Yeah.
If we had a decently graduated tax system, you wouldn't be saying, well, we'll raise taxes by putting a penny on the pound for everyone, or the idiot way in which we often do it, which is put it on VAT, which is the flattest tax. So in fact, it's an inverse tax. It taxes the poor more than the rich.
But maybe that report, maybe that is saying that the older people are willing to pay something towards it. I mean, you're sort of saying that we haven't, and it's disgusting, and it should happen. Perhaps there is an agreeable population out there that think you're right, that we should be doing something about it.
I agree with you. There must be. I mean, but so maybe my annoyance is slightly misplaced. I certainly think there are plenty of people who it never occurred to them. They're just not interested.
No, you're spot on.
But I think you are also right that even if you did want to, which political party could you vote for? It takes us back to our last podcast. That's the problem. There is nobody. But nevertheless, I think I just really want to say, look, we do owe that generation something extraordinary. We do owe them. Morally, we owe them something. We ought to be saying, you did something extraordinary for us. It's our turn to do something extraordinary for you.
I agree.
And if our politicians won't do it, then we need to demand it.
Yeah.
And it's not as if fixing education is like solving nuclear fusion. It's just not. We put men on the moon and brought them back again. We can't fix the education system. I mean, there's only two things you've ever needed to do to fix the education system.
Go on then. What are those two things?
Oh, come on, they're the easiest ones.
Fund
you need to build more schools so that you can half the class size and have more teachers. How do you know this is the answer? Look at all of the public schools.
Yeah.
Is Eton populated by geniuses who are genetically popping out of the aristocracy, who are just such geniuses that, that's why Eton is good? No.
This is the charity status Eton we're talking about, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Those schools, they have small class sizes, which means that the teachers aren't spending half of their time just trying to keep people, from misbehaving. They've got time to talk to each individual student.
Yeah.
And yet, and I asked my kids the whole time they were going through school, and they just looked at me like, "Why are you even asking this question?" Of course, it's clear to kids in school.
Yeah. I think that's the problem that I had. I mean, class sizes were 35, probably around that kind of figure, and that was the thing. I feel outsider syndrome anyway, but then you put yourself into a system like that where there's got to be a balance, and I understand that there's a balance between educating the most amount of people with an amount of money.
Sure.
And I would sort of say, yeah, but it's kind of like we've been doing it half-arsed for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Class sizes were too big. There's the book that you lent me. The what was it called?
Oh, the Pattern Seekers.
Pattern Seekers. Yeah, the Simon Cohen, Baron Cohen. That's the one. Everything that he was writing about in terms of the people that we need in a society to be the think outside the box, to be those people that they're. I can't get my head around. You don't produce people like that by having an educational system where everyone's got to think the same and you can't be critical of anything and you must toe the line and be subservient. That doesn't happen.
Well, agreed.
I mean, I kind of suspect that a lot of the people that do succeed probably succeed because they've had to fight through that. But I don't think it should be a fight. I think it should be more one-on-one, certainly down to smaller class sizes.
Yeah, well, the thing is, kids can learn in a large class in the sense of open your book at page 53, start taking notes, or here's the vocabulary, copy it down, or let's all say this together.
Yeah.
But you can't get kids to question and think in large groups. No. And that's the difference. I mean, I've said this to my kids, and I've been teaching recently, and it's funny how when you do mention this to kids in the classroom, they all nod at you as if you were just saying it's blazingly obvious, because you are. That they were all saying, well, at school it's 90% learning and 10% thinking. And I said, I think it should be at least 50-50.
Yeah.
That the problem with our schools is there's way, way too much learning funnily enough,
Yeah.
and not enough time thinking. If you just learn stuff, stuff that other people have told you, obviously you have to do that. You have to learn your times table if you want to be able to multiply things.
Yeah.
There are some things you need to learn. Fair enough. But that's fairly quickly, if you want kids to learn in a way where they've actually made this a part of their thinking mind, rather than just something jotted down in a book that they could maybe find before the exam, then they need to think about what they're learning. You need thinking time, and there's hardly any in our schools.
Can I just pull you up about something?
Sure.
In a previous podcast, I've described you as clever. You replied to the saying, "I just read a lot of books," and you bat it away. And I'm asking you to stop batting it away, because the books will give you knowledge, but it's being able to take that knowledge and apply wisdom alongside it. And I think that's the crux of what we're talking about. Fine, you can teach facts and facts and facts, and this is the problem, that education now is so much results based.
Okay. Yes, exactly.
And that table method.
Yeah.
learning.
Well, that gets us to the whole Blair thing. That was we've got to have some way to pull up standards.
Yeah.
I mean, that sentence, how could you argue with that sentence? It's like saying we should do away with war. Well, you're hardly going to say, no, I want more war. No, I want lower standards. So, okay, fine. But my question was, how many really bad teachers were there? And I'm not sure there's ever been a time when there was just the system was overwhelmed with bad teachers, that there were armies of useless, selfish, stupid layabouts, all thinking to themselves, you know what? The way I'm going to screw the system is I'm going to become a teacher.
No, I don't. I think
I remember I had one really bad teacher.
Yeah.
And the rest of them varied from adequate to great.
Yeah.
So, of course we need to improve standards, but,
well,
that was the problem all along, and not the fact that we had fairly crappy buildings that leaked in the winter and were boiling hot in the summer, and we had class sizes, as you said, of 30. They never got talked about. And
well, they did, because I remember soon after leaving school that certainly it was being discussed that was it could have been Labour at that time sort of saying we're going to get class sizes below 30, around about 25, and of course you hear this and assume that that's been done, and class sizes now are smaller than they are. But then the other problem that you've touched on, the people that are providing the education and the teachers, my sister teaches, and I've spoken to her and sort of said, what is the teaching profession like at the moment? And she just said, well, where do you start? There's a bullying culture, there's mental health, you've got Ofsted overseeing these league tables, and they come in for 30 minutes to surveil you.
Yeah.
Everything's targets driven. She was talking about value added. This was one of the things that the teachers had to do. It was kind of like, right, we're going to go for value added. So any student that was on a B or a C, the value added targets they were going for was trying to push them up from a C to a B and a B to an A. So obviously, you've got to sort of think, well, if I was in their shoes, I would choose the students that I think I could do that. So you'll focus on certain students. But then the next term, it changes to, oh, no, we've got to get A's and B's. So then you forget about the C's and you just concentrate on getting the good A's and B's. So
this is part of the problem with Ofsted. I agree with you. I mean, like I said, if someone comes in and said, well, we're going to bring in a system to raise standards, it just sounds like, well, of course, yeah. But the way that they did it, I wasn't there when it started, so I can't speak about it, but I can certainly speak about what it's become. Because like you, I talked to a teacher I met at a party a little while ago, and he was a little bit in his cups when I chatted to him.
Yeah.
But it was obvious this was someone who loved teaching, had always loved teaching, and had just come to the end of the road. And he just said, no one trusts me to teach. It's endless paperwork, and I just have to hit targets. And that what they care about are the targets, not the kids.
Totally.
That part of the problem is that when you have a system which says we're going to measure success, then every idiot knows that you can only measure the measurable.
Yeah.
So you then have league tables.
Yes.
And you have rankings, and you have exam results, because they can all be measured.
Yeah.
The excitement and the inspiration that a kid might get from a teacher taking the time to inspire that kid by presenting something and asking them questions which are designed to get that kid's mind to light up, that can't be measured, so it doesn't get measured, so it's not part of the equation.
Yeah.
And so you end up with teachers being forced to, by the people who run the schools, to teach to the exam, because the results of that can be measured. And so we do have a system where everyone is forced to stick to a narrow curriculum. There is no time for inspiring kids.
Yeah.
I mean, teachers can try, but on their own head be it. And it's just about the teaching to the exam. Stick to the curriculum, teach to the exam, and just get them to rote learn. We have gone backwards.
Yeah.
Radically gone backwards.
I mean, any parent that I talk to over the last sort of 10 years that have had children that have gone through schooling, their success or failure at exam time is all down to past papers. So what we're teaching kids is how to pass an exam, because we're sort of saying this will get taught, and this is how you answer it. So that goes back to the Michael Malice kind of like subduing the pupils. Yeah.
Well, it just says it's about learning what you're expected to write rather than
It's not critical thinking, is it?
No, it's not. And we end up with teachers who want to inspire being forced out.
Yeah.
And then naturally, the people who survive are those who are much more comfortable with just teach. So teach to the exam, just the tick box culture. And so you end up with this system.
Yeah.
Becoming the means by which it recreates the education system in its own tick box image. So we're recruiting people to it. The only people who can survive in it are ones who can survive with that. And,
so it's something my sister touched on in her talking about colleagues feeling crushed, feeling pressure, and basically teachers being driven out of the profession just through frustration and being burnt out.
Yeah, and they know they're not trusted.
Yeah.
They know they're not trusted, that the entire workplace is, we don't trust you, so we're constantly going to look over your shoulder, constantly make you fill out paperwork. Did you spend enough time on this? Where have you got to the curriculum? Have you covered this point? What was the exam on the test? How did your kids do? So they are not trusted to be the purveyors of thinking and intellectual interest and excitement. And that the kids know this. The kids aren't stupid. Hell, I taught for a year, and I taught in a school which was a dreadful school, and my kids were the bottom of the heap. The other teachers called them the animals. But these supposedly very stupid kids, they were stupid considered stupid because they were in the lowest stream and they all failed and they had to repeat year after year.
Yeah.
But these supposedly stupid kids, they weren't stupid. They were worldly and they understood. And almost on day one, it was like maybe day 3, one of them said, "Young man, why should I learn this stuff?" I was teaching, it was in New Jersey, and I was teaching fundamental biology, which was mostly fundamental, as in, please sit down.
Yeah.
And I said to them, well, I'm not sure how much practical biology I need to teach you, because half of the girls there already had a kid at age 15. And they thought that was quite funny.
Yeah.
And so, I thought, well, I can give them the usual bullshit about, well, if you work hard, you'll get a good job. But these were the bottom of the heap in America. They were poor and they were black. And I said to them, look, nothing you learn in my class is going to help you get a better job. If you can tell me the 5 qualities by which you can tell what if something's a mammal, that's not going to mean you get a better job.
No.
That's not why you should bother turning up. And I said, so they said, so, yo, man, why should we? And I said, there's one reason above all others. Now, when they were 15, 16, I said, now is when you decide what kind of parent you're going to be in life.
Yeah.
There are 2 kinds of parents. There's the parent who, when their child says, "Dad, what is that?" you go, "Shit, I don't know, go ask someone else." Or you're the parent who says, "Well," and you can tell them something, and your kid listens to you and is impressed.
Yeah.
And that made sense to them because it was at least honest. And I don't think our education system is being honest. And if we continue to tell them, well, if you work hard and you get A's, you'll have a better life. Too many kids can see quite clearly this is not going to work for them.
Yeah.
And so then they think, why should I? The teacher doesn't have time for me. The teacher's not actually able to take an interest in me because there's 30 other people, quite a few of whom have emotional problems. The class is a bit of a shambles. And all I'm told is open your book and copy these things down and just take notes and just regurgitate what I've told you and do a few practice exams so you can actually not only tell me what I want you to tell me, but tell it to me in the exact phrases that I want.
Yes.
That examiners want you. What kind of a stupid system is that? And when people don't want to make it, as this is where you started, like, we've got so many other things. And I understand that, if you're worried about whether you can actually switch the heating on and give your kids something good to eat, and then someone says, we should be spending more on education, you might agree with them, but you think, how? But, it's not a long timeline to failure.
But it's what I was going to say is when I was referring to sort of government and the NHS and are they using it? It's almost that the educational this system of constantly changing what we're asking teachers to do.
Sure.
When does that stop? When do we have some kind of, I'm going to sound completely stupid now, but when do we have a cross-party agreement on an educational system which is allowed to do the things that we've been talking about, that is funded in a way that allows not necessarily one-on-one, but certainly smaller class sizes?
It's not going to happen, Ian. It's not going to happen because if it was, both parties have had 50 years
well, that's what I was...
to say the obvious. They haven't. Why would they suddenly do so now? The whole competition is both sides know what needs to be done, and it costs money. You need to have more teachers, smaller class sizes. That's it.
Yeah.
There are no other things that you need that are as fundamental as those two things. But neither wants to do that. And so then it becomes a competition to see who can come up with the most polished sounding bullshit. And so, we're going to have increased Ofsted inspections. Well, we're going to have academies. And they both come up with things which are largely irrelevant to the real problem.
Arranging the chairs on the Titanic, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And, when I said it's not a long timeline to failure, what I mean is that education is not something you can say, well, we'll get to it in a few decades. No. Your child goes to school age, 5? Mm-hmm. And by 18, a lot of them have popped out at the end of it. And whether they're going to try and go on to university or not, they've already experienced the bulk of their education and what they think about education in from 5 to 18.
Yeah.
So that's 13 years? So you've got 13 years. And if you neglect that child's education, that child will pop out at the end of 18 being disillusioned, badly educated, not interested in education, and had the idea that there is a pleasure in thinking and that they can think beaten out of them. And you've achieved all of that in 13 years.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take long to fail a generation. And we've failed loads of them. When are we going to stop? Well, our children.
Well, that was one of the things that I kind of came across a while ago. It was a Harvard document that was basically looking at something about teaching tips. Now, this is going back to sort of the 1970s. So the discussion was there then on teaching practice. And it was throwing up reports from 1967. So, I mean, I'm being a bit flippant by sort of asking you as if you're going to know when this is all going to change. But that's it. Society was aware of it, and society were talking about it back in the 70s.
And there were some experiments. I think, what was it? Summerhill School, I think that's the name. Forgive me if I got it wrong. But there were some famous experiments, and they had great successes, but it was then all sort of seen as all a bit too hippie and free love, and we went back to the 3 R's. And And in a way, I'm just saying, look, let's not even get to that level of discussion before we get stuck in, people's ideological dead ends.
Yeah.
Why don't we just admit whichever ideology you want to impose on kids, do it in a school where there's 15 to a class size and enough teachers to go around.
Yeah.
And then however bad your ideology is, the kids will probably survive it.
Yeah. Just the slogan, the 3 R's, annoys the shit out of me anyway. Because they're not fucking R's.
Yes, exactly. Well,
but it's a great slogan, and we'll use that. Do you know what, actually, on a slightly different point, I don't do lots of social media and stuff like that, but I happened to sort of get a little message popped up. So I went to have a look, and it was on the Book of Faces. And one of my friends, George Borowski, he's a guitarist in Manchester. I posted a very simple thing. He said, "My dad said, it's all about division. Nothing more, nothing less." And I just went, yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking for about the last decade. Yeah. If you look at everything, and education sort of falls into this, we'll argue about, whether it's league tables, whether it's upgrading it, whether it's C's to B's or concentrate on this, and they'll keep the debate there, but they won't want us to step out. They'll want to keep
as long
us
as
divided.
they get everyone to debate their meaningless initiatives, then no one actually just says the only things that need to be said.
Yeah.
And I don't think the country can afford to not educate the young.
No, we can't.
And the kids, they do know they're being shortchanged. They're not stupid. I was in classes this last few weeks, and I was talking to a whole big bunch of Italian students, and the conversations we had were just, they were honest about what they thought worked and what they wanted, and it was clear they wanted to be able to not just learn new stuff, but to have someone say, well, what do you think about this? And to actually take an interest in what they thought, not just say, okay, you're in charge of the class. Not that kind of, the right wing's burlesque of the hippie notion, but just someone saying, well, you're not here just to memorize stuff. You're here to learn how to think and how to question and follow through your first thoughts to see if they lead to some sort of silliness. And the kids enjoyed that. Yeah. They enjoyed being asked. They enjoyed it when I would ask them a few more questions and they'd say, oh, I see. Yeah, that doesn't work, does it? They enjoyed it because they were part of it.
That's critical thinking. That's kind of like working things out. And that got to be at the center of when we're looking at all these future things and AI coming in and we just need that level of thinking.
I would say, right, we're going to start a crash program of building schools. And everyone always says, oh, you can't build schools that quickly. And yet we can put up tower blocks and cheap houses between one weekend and the next, apparently. Well, so of course we can.
Our current education secretary, is it Keegan or something? She came out and sort of said the kids are enjoying being taught in these demountable buildings that they're shipped into the schools because of the failing bubbly concrete.
Yeah. I mean, the dishonesty just beggars belief. Build some schools, and I would do it day one, say we're starting a crash program building schools and pump some money into it, and then say, and we need teachers to fill them. And you need to do it fast because you need to make it a fait accompli for the incoming government if you're voted out in 5 years' time. It needs to be something that it's so far along they can't stop it.
But this sort of takes me back to what you were telling me about the sort of financial system, in terms of one government goes in and says, "Oh, we're going to build bridges," and then the next one comes in and says, "No, we're going to do this." For me, education's that point is, and I don't know where to go because nothing against civil servants, but there kind of feels as if there needs to be a body that can oversee education that is not twisted and turned for the sake of the teachers, if no one else. That there's just an ideology that can be agreed on, even if it's just A, B, and C, and we just do that, and then all of the other things can be flexible or can be sort of manipulated.
That's why I think that I agree with you, and that's why I think you start off with more schools, more teachers, because you haven't then got into the idea, well, what are they going to teach? What's the curriculum? Are we going to teach that Britain is great, or are we going to teach that Britain is a terrible thing? What are we going to teach? What's it going to be? Don't get bogged down in all of that. Like I said, have the schools, have the teachers, have the small class size. And at that point, the worst government with the most toxic ideology in the world, the kids will probably survive. They'll survive the idiocy of whatever government their parents foist upon them. If they've at least got a refuge where with 15 other kids or 14 other kids and a teacher who's free to teach in a small class, in that little refuge, they'll probably be able to make something which can't be destroyed by bureaucrats. I mean, the bureaucrats here destroyed the local school that my kids went to. They had a good school, and they had a school that was really, really in trouble. And instead of saying, right, we should now put some money into the school that's failing and stop it failing, oh no, what they did is they said, rather than put any money in at all, let's just amalgamate the two schools. As if somehow, it's like saying, here's a man with Ebola and here's a man who's not. Let's stick them together. Rather than cure the man with Ebola, let's just make them live together, because maybe the man who's well will be able to help him out. No, they both die of Ebola, and that's what happened. So the bad school didn't get any better, and the good school utterly fell apart. And for almost the entire time my kids were at that school, it was in special measures. And at one point, they said, well, we haven't got enough teachers, and we're going to have to close the library because we're going to get rid of the librarian. So it was going to be a school without a library. And the only reason it stayed open is because my two lads said, well, we'll run it. How pathetic is that? Utterly pathetic. And the town bureaucrats and education system bureaucrats who oversaw the demolition of a good school and the catastrophe that heaped upon a generation of kids, they're fine. They're just absolutely fine. They didn't care. That has to stop.
Can I ask you a closing question then?
Sure.
Are we as a society a little bit too hung up on getting 9 A stars, getting to university? I mean, the back of this is as I was growing up, they got rid of apprenticeships. I knew when I was at school it was doing nothing for me. So is there something in society? Is there something in the pattern spotters? Should I have left school at 14 and gone to a different educational establishment? Should I have gone on to an apprenticeship at 14?
Well, yeah, I mean, it gets back to where you started, which is education isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all. And the larger the class size, the more it has to be one-size-fits-all.
But are we driving so much of the importance of your degree?
I think we are. I mean, the country needs well-educated people who are educated in a more academic way. Sure. It also needs people who are good at all of the other things that need to be done and enjoy it. I think part of the problem was there was this notion that, and quite rightly, that it's what lay behind the idea of the secondary modern, that there's an arbitrary point at which we measure kids, and all it takes is for my friend Stephen Mayne to have had a row with his very unpleasant dad the night before or have a cold, and he's going to do badly on the exam. And that was it. His life changed. There was something very wrong with that, especially when it was thought that, well, you fund the grammar schools, but you don't really fund the rest. And so the thought was, all these kids, we don't know who are the good ones and who are the ones who are going to flourish with exposure to academic ideas and who won't. So let's make sure that we're not just weeding them out in an arbitrary fashion. That's true. But of course, then the opposite's true. As you just said, then there are kids who it's not for them and it's a torture for them. Well, how do you decide between the two? Well, I'll tell you a good way is have teachers who know their kids.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, none of the problems are so insoluble that you need to resurrect Einstein and say, mate, this is so complicated. How does this work? So kids are different. So you need to have people who can see those differences. Who would those people be? Maybe it would be teachers. Okay. How should we do that? Let's give them time to do that. How can we do that? Well, let's have them only in charge of 15 kids in a class instead of 30. Wow. We really needed Einstein to figure that out for us. Every politician who's ever lied to us about education knew that, and they lied.
Yeah. That's a very good, succinct point to end on, I think, David. Thanks very much, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Do you want to tell the listeners where they can find your Substack?
Yeah. If you go to Substack, look up my name or Hyperland, leave us a comment, leave us an idea for something we should talk about. It would be great to hear what you think.
Thanks very much for listening, guys. Take care.
Cheers, mate.